If you are having trouble solo queuing in Apex Legends, trust me, you are not alone. Everyone has this problem at one point or another, and someone who pretty much solo queued exclusively from Season 2 through Season 5, and still a fair amount today, I figured I'd share some of my experiences as to what works and what doesn't. I will say this is going to be with the thought process of an average player, so someone who can have flashes of brilliance, but for the most part might struggle a little bit in taking opponents and playing with random teammates. This is also more so for pub games, but everything we're going to talk about is going to be pretty relative to ranked as well. And finally, there is no clear-cut way to win with randoms every time, and your experience is going to be very different based on how they're performing, but these tips will help you maximize your effectiveness in your games. The very first thing to talk about is going to be your legend choice, something that absolutely impacts the way you play, and even before you're in the game. Certain legends are just better with random teammates than others. 5 suggestions that I have that are pretty good for solo queue and will help your teammates that you maybe aren't talking to and fill a variety of playstyles are going to be Bloodhound, Lifeline, Loba, Crypto, and Gibraltar. You'll notice that every legend I'm picking here is a legend that isn't necessarily a top tier 1v3 warrior like Horizon, but rather I am now having the thought process of what are the best legends that can bring the most usefulness to my team with the minimal amount of skill and effort required. There is no beating around it. Apex Legends is a team game at heart, and playing like it isn't will always mean you are in a slight disadvantage, and again, these legends are going to help you and your team. My first choice is Bloodhound, as they are the easiest to use and the best teammate in my eyes, as the simple ability of the scan gives incredible amount of information to teammates with no communication required. And on top of this, the ultimate is great for playmaking. The second legend is going to be Lifeline. Lifeline is a great solo queue legend if you are slightly better than average player, as you can still be in the fight when you are also reviving your teammates who maybe are getting knocked more than you. Her overall kit might be a little weak, but the auto revive makes up for this in a huge way. Similar to this, Loba, another support legend, is also great not only for herself but also her team. The ability to get you and your teammates geared up and looted up faster than everyone else can be absolutely huge for getting positioning and taking the advantage in some early game fights. While her bracelet is still a little bit bugged at the moment, it is still a solid way for some movement, and a lot of the other legends don't have this movement capability with a lot of support capability as well. Gibraltar is a legend that I like to pick for solo because it has an extreme amount of usefulness, with the dome shield being used for revives, rotations, protection from ultimates, and more. And on top of this, he is one of my favorite legends when it comes to close range fights due to that gun shield and the huge amount of damage he can absorb. And finally, Crypto for me is a solid legend in solo queuing, but a bit harder to excel with. I pick him because he does have a little of everything from team support, scanning, offensive playmaking with EMP. I will say though that it does require a slightly better than average player to make the most of his kit while playing solo though, as it does require you to do a lot with no communication, and it can definitely be tough. Overall though, the legend is a small part, and playing the legend you want to play should be your first priority. And these are just my recommendations, and these are the legends I feel like I do a little bit better when I am playing solo queue. Moving on though, let's briefly talk about weaponry. This usually goes down in one of two ways, and for me it depends on what my teammates are playing. If I'm paired up with someone like Watson or Rampart, that usually signals to me that the game I'm about to play might be a little bit more slower paced, a little bit more defensive. This means I'll try to take something with a bit more mid to long range, maybe like an R301, a triple take, or a charge rifle, and then pair that up with a close range SMG or a shotgun. Whereas on the opposite side of things, if I get paired up with a Wraith or Horizon or a Pathfinder, this signals to me that I am probably in for a little bit faster paced game, and I'll take something more like a R301 with a Shotty or an R99. And this is a little bit more typical in terms of my type of playstyle, and this is a little bit more aggressive. The big takeaway though is that I would always err on the side of caution and bring more of a medium type of loadout. This goes into a topic that we will soon discuss of taking fights, but more times than not, I find the teammates I play with are a bit more passive, afraid, and slower paced, and this does require me to adjust accordingly, and almost always if I take a medium range type of loadout, it does help me when I am running these type of weapons rather than too close range weapons or too long range weapons. Of course, the legend a player picks also isn't necessarily a for surefire sign that they are going to play in a particular way, so you do need to be mindful of this, and the legend that someone is taking is really just an initial indicator of how they could perform not a for sure way that they are going to perform that way. Before we move on, I just want to say if you're enjoying the video, hit that like button, and if you have any questions on solo queuing or Apex in general, stop by our Twitch streams and I would love to chat all things Apex Legends. Let us now talk about communication, or almost lack thereof if you are solo queuing. In a perfect world, you're going in with a microphone and communicating this way with both of your random teammates that also have microphones. However, this rarely is the case, and even myself, I don't usually talk to my random teammates. I pretty much kind of just mute them right away. Maybe this isn't a good thing, but the best, and at minimum what you need to be doing, is to be pinging as much as possible, within reason of course. You should almost always be pinging enemy locations, where to move, pinging loot, where you are dropping, not just general areas, but even specific buildings. Respawn made this extremely robust and revolutionary pinging system, and we should all be using it. Unless, of course, you're knocked spamming enemy pings or, to pick up your banner. Don't do this. Another thing that isn't directly involved with communication, but also be on the lookout as to what your team is running. Open the inventory and take a look in the corner to see what your teammates are using in terms of ammo, what gear they have. Also, if they need ammo, health, or shields, share it with them. Don't be greedy. One teammate that is low on shields isn't going to do much for you if you do go into a full team that is fully stacked and ready to go. The first thing after choosing a legend is, of course, dropping. And this right here is what I deem the most important factor of whether you are going to succeed in your games. A bad drop generally can mean poor loot and a poor overall game experience, which is crazy because it's such a simple thing, but seconds matter at the start of games. If possible, physically pick your legend every time. This better assures that you have a higher chance to become Jump Master. If you aren't Jump Master though, within a few seconds you need to analyze the dropship path and ping a spot on the map. The worst possible thing that could happen is no one pings anything and then you're landing really late at a spot. I would say to not even wait for your teammates to ping, because you don't know if they are paying attention or not. Generally, I find it works best this way, and this means you are already taking charge of your squad, meaning your life is in your hands, not some random Jump Master who is unsure of where to go, where to drop, how to drop. Finally, I almost always suggest landing somewhere around mid dropship path, meaning not too hot, but also somewhere where it isn't completely dead with no action, because no action just means you aren't going to improve. So unless you're an absolute warrior or a pro player, you should always be mindful of the fights you are taking. An average team of 3 players will pretty much always win over one good player, because Apex is definitely a team-oriented game. This tip is a little less clear-cut, but be analyzing where your teammates are, where they are going, and their skill level. I can almost always tell a player's skill level, both teammates and enemies, by the way they are moving around the map. And if they are able to move and keep up with me, or if I'm having a harder time keeping up with them, then I pretty much know their skill level and how they are going to perform in the game. The main goal that you need to keep in mind when it comes to shooting at a team or taking a fight is to make sure you aren't prematurely starting any engagement that will get you knocked or injured without any backup. This means your team needs to be within a reasonable range, obviously not holding hands, but they need to be able to help you and assist you with fighting. This of course goes back to communication and pinging to keep your team aware of what you want to do and what fights you want to take. And one more thing with fights for me, it will depend a bit on your thought process, but I will never jeopardize my game for a bad decision my teammate makes. This means if they blindly make a push or an aggressive play without you around, then that is not your problem, and you need to probably just adjust your game accordingly. And this usually means I end up playing a bit slower, as I am probably soon to be without that teammate. But of course, solid team play and some minimal amount of communication will help you avoid this. But even then, sometimes it's inevitable that TTV Wraith is going to quit before, their knees even get on the ground or they're knocked. Finally, let's briefly talk about endgame and choosing when to fight. Endgame fights with random teammates might be the most important part of your game next to dropping. An easy way to clutch up a win is if you hear 2 teams fighting and there are 3 squads left. This instantly triggers to me that there's 2 teams already fighting and I need to be there ready to third party them and clean up that single team that's left over or finish off both teams. I almost never try to be on the team that is fighting when there are 3 to 4 squads left, because I don't want to be getting third partied and lose my game right at the end of a match. And this really is the case when I am solo queuing, because I don't have optimal communication like I would if I'm playing with my main squad. And this is even more prevalent when you are solo queuing, because I can't communicate with my random teammates quite as effectively to tell them, we need to back out of here. There's a third party coming in, there's a fourth party coming in, and we might not be able to coordinate as well to escape out of an area. Other than this though, if you do make it to endgame with your random teammates, you probably are doing pretty good, as this generally is a harder thing to do with the majority of average players. So there's a few tips about what I do and how I analyze the game when I am solo queuing in Apex Legends, and this is just my overall thought process. Unfortunately, there isn't any clear-cut way to win with randoms more time than not. It is a tough experience and one that takes a lot of adjusting to, and you're going to need an immense amount of patience in your gameplay. If you have any more tips, I'd love to hear them down in the comments below, and let me know how Season 8 for you has been. We are rapidly approaching Season 9 in Apex Legends, and I am getting the pre-season excitement. I appreciate all the support as of late, and I will see you live in the Twitch streams. Peace out.